Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I'd like to welcome someone who's a Monroe J. Rathbone English Professor of International Relations at Lehigh University. He has authored or co-authored nearly a dozen academic books, including influential works on neoclassical realism, peacemaking, grand strategy, and political economy of national security. He's also the author of several fiction books, including his latest, Bullet Holes. Please help me welcome Norrin Ripsman. Norrin, thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, pleasure to be here, Jonathan.
Well, I always like to start by going back with people. So I was reading, you were born in Canada. I want to know, what was your life like, in particular with regard to Judaism?
Okay, I was born in Montreal. I lived there for 7 years and moved to Toronto as part of the Anglophone exodus. Actually, a little bit before the Anglophone exodus, when the Parti Québécois came to power in Quebec. My father was a pharmacist who designed the first drug benefit plan for the province of Canada. Actually, I think it was the first provincial drug benefit plan in Canada for the Liberal government. And he found that he was treated differently. So he had two French Canadian deputies working for him for the Minister of Health. And he was working for the deputy minister. At the end of it, the deputy minister shook his hand, congratulated him, and then gave two plum patronage appointments to his French Canadian assistants. And he went and arranged another meeting with the deputy minister and said, was Monsieur le Ministre dissatisfied in any way with my performance? No, absolutely. You did a great job, Michael. And he says, well, why is it that, you've rewarded my deputies and not me? And he says, well, you have to understand your name is Michael Ripsman and their names are, and he said, but my French is better than theirs is. And the deputy minister said, yeah, but, and he said this, which really shook my father. He said, you know how it is in Israel where you Jews get the jobs and the Arabs don't?
Wow.
That was like a punch in my father's stomach on so many different levels. The minister says, that's the way it's got to be here in Quebec. And so my father beforehand thought that he wanted to get his family, his kids in particular, out of Quebec. And had an opportunity to move to Toronto. So we moved to Toronto about a year or so before the Parti Québécois actually won the first general election. And I was part of of an observant family, synagogue-going family, and we moved from a nice community in Saint-Laurent, Quebec, a suburb of Montreal, to Bathurst Manor in Toronto. And I grew up there, did my bachelor's and master's there, and moved to Philadelphia, where I am now again for my PhD. But part of as I say, an observant family. Judaism was a very central part of my family's life and still is today.
I'd always heard about things in Quebec being like that. You and I were just talking a little bit beforehand, before we started recording. It seems to be spreading in Canada is the problem right now. So just curious now, were there any influences in books or music or mentors, I guess, that sparked your love of writing?
So I loved writing. My father was very influential in my reading. And so there are a lot of books that he read that I picked up off his shelf that really shaped me. Jewishly, I came from the city of Mordechai Richler, and some of his book, I love Barney's version. I like The Apprenticeship of Dudi Kravitz, despite the objections that people have to it and the concerns that it was, not necessarily the most favorable or flattering portrait of Montreal Jews, shall we say. Nonetheless, thought his writing was brilliant. I love Barney's version, I think, which is his best overall book. So Jewishly, definitely that. People like Norman Mailer, absolutely loved. But I also really loved some broader classics. My father had a collection of Graham Greene's works that I absolutely adored. And I ate that up as a kid. I like John le Carré. So when I was 15 years old and a student of a Jewish day school, high school in Toronto, I started writing a prologue and 4 chapters of my first novel attempt, which never got past that. It's not anything that I would ever write now, although I showed it to my daughters. I showed it to my daughters when they turned 15. And got a bit of a laugh out of it. But I always knew that I would write fiction. It was a love of mine, and I decided that I would get back to that later in life. And I think actually learning how to write academic books really helped me get over that hump in terms of writing fiction books as well.
I was going to ask you about that, but so what drew you to political science originally?
What did I do, or what was I doing?
What drew you to it?
So what drew me to it? Well, international relations is my area, and in political science, although now I'm in a standalone international relations department. Honestly, I think, it's hard to actually go back and say what actually put me in one direction. I think when I was 5 years old, I was very impressed, very impacted upon by the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Because I was from an observant family. We didn't, watch television or listen to the radio on Shabbat or the holidays. But there was an exception made when I was 5 years old, and it was something that was very clear to me that in October of 1973, during the high holidays, after Yom Kippur and in Sukkot, all of a sudden on Shabbat and on the holidays, we had the radio going on around the dinner table and the lunch table because it was so important. And I had a sense at 5 years old that this was something critically urgent and critically important. And I think that sparked my interest. Maybe it was an innate interest as well, but it really sparked my interest in matters of war and peace. I always was interested in politics as a boy. I used to, when I was 9 years old, I took the train back on my own. Back then, you could do that type of thing, but I took the train back on my own between Toronto and Montreal to visit my grandparents. And at one point, I ended up befriending the CEO of a bargain distributor in Toronto. Didn't know who he was. He just mentioned that he worked at Byway, and I was just talking to him, and he was talking to me about this 9-year-old boy who was giving him my take on Quebec politics, on Canadian politics, on the next federal election and the like. And afterwards, he told me, I work in Byway. Come, bring your parents in when you get a chance. And I thought I was going to go meet some guy who was working at Byway. Turned out to be the CEO, and he just told them, your son was schooling me on Canadian politics. It just, yeah.
So, all right. So going back, so right now, like you said at the beginning, so you are Monroe J. Rathbone, Distinguished Professor of International Relations at Lehigh. So, can you kind of walk us through, what that means first of all, and your career path to get there, to get to Lehigh?
Okay, so I did, as I say, a bachelor's and a master's at the University of Toronto. I did a doctorate in the 1990s, from 90 to 97, in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania. After that, I did a postdoc at Hebrew University. I was studying the politics of peacemaking, and that was the ideal place for me to go. I did another postdoc at the Mershon Center at Ohio State University. Had a teaching position at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and got my first teaching position at, which I held for 16 years at Concordia University in Montreal. And at that point, I was offered this research chair at this distinguished professorship research chair at Lehigh in the International Relations Department, which is a department that I knew because I actually taught here for a year while finishing my doctorate at Penn. So it was a department that I knew that I was really happy to be part of, one of the few international relations departments as standalone departments. And it was a no-brainer. I mean, it was just an easy decision to move back to Philadelphia. I like the community here. It's just wonderful to be here.
Good. So I won't I don't know if I should tell you that as a Mets fan, it's one of the places that I hate now, Philly, but I probably would like the city itself. But so you've co-authored and edited influential works on neoclassical realism, I saw. So what is it about that, the neoclassical realism, that offers a powerful lens for understanding foreign policy?
So there, usually to explain international relations, you have basic approaches or theories. One of them is an outside-in approach, which is called structural realism, which assumes that if you want to understand foreign policy or international politics, you've got to understand power relations and dynamics at the system level between states. And therefore, leaders don't matter that much. The dynamics of the country, the domestic political factors don't matter that much. What really matters are great power relations and pressures from outside. There's an innenpolitik approach, which is an internal approach, which assumes that the main drivers are not the international system, but are in fact leader perceptions and goals, which are perhaps the structure of the system, the domestic political system, in nature of state-society relations, coalition politics, etc. And neoclassical realism is an attempt to build a more synthetic approach, because what I've always found as a student is that the paradigmatic approaches that we use to understand international politics are they're treated like churches or altars that you have to genuflect before, rather than as lenses that you can accumulate to get a bigger picture of things. So my metaphor is, if you want to understand an elephant, you can put on one set of lenses and see that it's gray and crinkly, and that's right. But that's not everything. And you can put on another set of lenses which say that it's got a curly tail and a trunk, and that's also right. And so to me, if you want to understand the whole elephant, you need to actually accumulate those lenses, put on multiple lenses. Well, that's what neoclassical realism does, but it's not simply, we argue that it's not simply a shopping list or you just add things together. We have to have a systematic way of understanding how and when to use different lenses or different tools. So we start with the system, and we argue that states in general respond to the international system and pressures and opportunities, constraints and opportunities at the system level, but how they do so is conditioned by a whole range of unit and subunit factors that condition it. And so we argue that sometimes a structural realist approach is all you need to explain particular decisions in very rare circumstances, like 1967, for example. It was clear that Egypt had asked the UN Secretary General to withdraw troops, peacemaking forces from the Sinai. They had embargoed the Straits of Tiran. They blockaded the Straits of Tiran, and they had also mobilized there on the Syrian army. Under those circumstances, very few alternatives existed to preemption. It was a natural approach. Then a structural realist approach would be sufficient. But most of the time, international politics is not like that. And most of the time, you have to understand why states pursued particular choices. So that's it. In a nutshell, our argument is that states start with responses start with the system almost always, but how they respond is tailored by the unique domestic political circumstances and the leadership goals.
I feel like I just sat through one of your classes now. So you've published, you have quite an impressive resume about just books published without counting the fiction ones right now. So you published many academic books and 30 articles I've read. So I just wonder, which is the most challenging for you, rewarding out of what you've done so far?
I love everything I've done. Earlier in my career, I had to learn how to write an academic book, and that was a challenge to learn. Also, it's a different type of challenge. When I sit and write a book, I have a 2016 book, which is the culmination of many, many years of working on the politics of peacemaking between regional rivals. And that book came out after I started that self-consciously as a book, after I published an article in 2005. So it's about 11 years of conscious work to write and research in multiple locations, interviewing decision makers in multiple countries, doing research in archives. in multiple countries and languages in order to be able to produce that and produce that satisfactorily, to verify everything that I wrote. That was a challenge. It's a huge endeavor to do that and do that carefully. But I know how to do that now. I do that on a regular basis. Fiction is a different kind of challenge. Actually, the first novel that I published, which came out a couple of years ago, The Oracle of Spring Garden Road, which is a Jewish-themed novel set in Halifax and Toronto. That novel was a steep learning curve because I knew what I wanted to do, but on one hand, you have the freedom of being able to I don't need to verify everything. I don't need to sit down and go through memoranda of conversations which often conflict and which are often, distorted, and try and figure out what actually happened and what can I say. So I have that freedom and the freedom to let my mind decide things. But on the other hand, that freedom is a very big curse because, the structure of an academic book suggests itself to you, and there's a limit to what you can do and how you do it. Whereas with with a novel, it's kind of dizzying. There are no guardrails, and so I find them both exciting and exhilarating. Right now, I guess at this point in my career, I have my 11th academic book is coming out with Columbia University Press. It's actually on it's a co-authored book on grand strategy of Middle Eastern states, and that's coming out next in March. But I enjoy doing that. I love that. It was a book that I really enjoyed working on. Somehow fiction right now is exhilarating in a different way, and I'm enjoying that right now.
Well, it's a different creative muscle entirely, kind of, even though they're both writing. Yeah, it's different parts of your brain being used, I think.
It took me a while at first. I'm sorry. It took me a while at first when I started writing fiction about 5-6 years ago. When I started writing fiction, it was hard for me to switch back and forth because it's a very different kind of writing also. I mean, when you write...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so it took me a while to shift back and forth. And when I write fiction, I have to let my mind float. And I have to let my mind get lyrical. And I have to get into the zone. It used to be very hard for me to switch back and forth. I actually now, it's not hard for me to switch back and forth. I can understand that, okay, this evening I'm in fiction mode. Let's forget about the academics for now.
But you also get, look, even in the nonfiction, you can still get creative with the way you describe something. So it's still there as well. That's what I found, at least. I mean, it's still, you definitely have to do the research. You definitely have to be factual, but you can still get a little creative with how you do it. So,
yeah, I think my writing is not typical academic writing because I do enjoy writing it as well, but it's not the same thing. In the end, I can't let a metaphor take over. I have to discipline a metaphor in the service of what it is, of the point I'm making. And if in fact the metaphor gets in the way of clear understanding, I can actually give you an example of that. When I was doing my dissertation, and this is not my writing, this is someone else's writing. When I was doing my dissertation, I was on peacemaking between Britain, France, and the United States, three democracies on one hand, and Germany on the other hand after 2 world wars. I was looking at a French ambassador, René Massiglis' memoirs. He was a pivotal person in negotiations over the European Defence Community Treaty. And at the 2 points, I had real problems because he was a Frenchman writing in metaphorical, lyrical sense, and at times, and it wasn't clear. So at one point he says, we all know what happened next, were his words in there. And I'm thinking, well, I can think of about a half a dozen things that he might be referring to, but I don't actually know what he's referring to. And I remember talking to the historian on my committee and asking him, so what do you think? And he said the same thing. And I couldn't nail down because he was being vague. I was very, very lyrical in a sense, the way he wrote. Another thing he wrote, even more serious, was he says, he was talking about a certain negotiation. And he says, and of course the Americans adhered to our request. Now, I had the transcripts of the meetings from the French, the British, and the American delegations, and that was absolutely false because the Americans shot down their request, and I couldn't figure that out. And I was reading it, and I went to the historian on my committee, and I said, "What's going on here?" And he says, "Well, that's ridiculous. I don't think they agreed to that. They didn't." And I said, "No, they didn't. I have here are the meeting minutes. So what's he saying?" And it took me an awful long time to figure out that he was being ironic, which of course you can't tell in print.
Of course, it's very hard to decipher just when you see just plain text on something. Right? Absolutely. That's why I tell people not to text if they have something important to say, to call.
So it's that I'm very conscious of when I write fiction, when I write nonfiction, rather. I'm very conscious of the fact that often meaning has got to trump metaphor or lyricism. It's got to be exact sometimes, and sometimes, in the interest of precision, I have to, make it a dry textual sentence in order to make certain that my meaning is not misunderstood.
So I read that, I don't know if it's true, but I want to know if you transitioned to writing fiction because something that your father said about not postponing passions influenced that decision. Is that accurate?
That is. So what happened is I've always wanted to write fiction. I mentioned that since I was 15 years old. I knew I was going to do that. And I told myself that I would do that when I retired. But in 2019, my father was, in the autumn, my father was diagnosed with the kidney cancer that eventually killed him. And thank you. And I drove in from Philadelphia to Toronto for his first 2 chemo treatments until they shut the border down as a result of COVID. And I was with him after the first chemo treatment. He was really complaining that he was bored. He was a very social man, and he was told that his immune system was compromised and that he couldn't really socialize because he could catch a cold that could kill him. And as a result of that, he had to stay in a lot more. And he was telling me how bored he was. And I said, "Well, Dad, you've always wanted to write fiction," which he did. He always wanted to write The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He thought that was the greatest book ever written, and he wanted to write something like that. And I said, "So why don't you do it?" And he said, "It's too damn late." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Well, he doesn't have the ideas that he had when he was younger." He says he doesn't have the Sitzfleisch just to sit and write. He couldn't even curl himself up in the position that he would need to write. And he says he should have done that decades ago. It's too late now. So I, took that to heart. It's not like I listened to him right away, but I took that to heart. And a number of months later, I said, "All right, I have a short story idea, and I'm going to listen to my father." My father was a very important influence on my life. I had mentioned literarily already, but he was a very important influence on my life in all aspects. And so I listened to him. And over the summer, I wrote my first short story. And before I finished that, my second short story came. And before I finished that, it just kept on coming. It was and in the end, that turned into Songbook, which is a collection of short stories, 14 short stories, loosely inspired or associated with my brain afterwards, in some cases, by or with the lyrics and music of classic rock music.
Very nice. That's a very good story. I'm similar with my dad, so I can totally appreciate you coming from it. And my dad always wanted to write as well, so that's one of the things that made me happy that he got to see one of my books published before he passed also. So it's like, yeah, very similar. So let's talk about Bullet Holes. Tell me about the book itself.
So Bullet Holes is my current novel. It's and it is another Jewish themed novel. It's set in where I live in Philadelphia. It's fiction, but it's set where I live in Philadelphia. Geography is very important to me. I have to understand the geography before I can write it. And it takes place over the weekend of Manny Perlmutter's bar mitzvah. And Manny is or was a twin. 9 months before the bar mitzvah, he lost his twin brother Danny in a school shooting in suburban Chicago. And the family moved to Philadelphia to try to escape the pain. And now 9 months later, they're coming together for the bar mitzvah. Now, the Perlmutter or Perlmutter-Grossberg family is an interesting family. And they're in a sense, a model family in the United States. Because They are a politically diverse family. Gary, the father, is from an Orthodox background, a very politically conservative background. He's a Republican, Trump supporter, all the values you would expect that he might hold under those circumstances. His wife, Pauline, is from more of a working class Democratic family from Columbus, Ohio. She is a lifelong Democrat. She's from a secular background. She holds all the values that Gary doesn't hold. And that's never really been a problem for the family. In fact, they've always seen it as the holiness of their marriage, that they put their differences aside. So they teased each other. They had a lot of fun with it. She used to call Gary my little deplorable. Gary used to refer to her as Ruth Bader Grossberg. And they would date each other, but that was the end of it. And then the holiness of the family is they never let that interfere with their family life until 9 months, 9 months before, Danny was shot in a school shooting. And so all of a sudden, their different positions on, amongst other things, the Second Amendment really comes to the fore. So the two families are coming together in Philadelphia for the bar mitzvah, and sparks start to fly. They're dealing with their grief, but they're also, their political differences are starting to be very considerable, if not insurmountable. And so the novel takes place over the weekend of the bar mitzvah, and it's told from the perspective of 9, or in some respects 10 different characters, although one character doesn't get her own chapter. So each chapter is told from the perspective of a different character. And you meet 9 different characters with different worldviews, and that's deliberate. So you meet Manny, who's dealing with his grief and his guilt. He was in the room when his brother was shot. He's dealing with the grief and the guilt of being the survivor. You're dealing with Gary and Pauline. I've already introduced them to you. You're dealing with a big brother, Evan, who's finds the grief very, very heavy. He's 18 years old and he just wants to get on with his life. He's moving to UCLA. The bar mitzvah is taking place in June of 2024, and he's moving to Los Angeles in August of 2024 to start his life as a college freshman, and he can't get out fast enough. You have a grandparent from each side whose head you get into. You get Zadie Perlmutter, who is the patriarch of the family, who's the son of Holocaust survivors, and has a very patriarchal, traditional worldview. You have Grandma Bindi Grossberg, who is very secular, but is also dealing with the fact that her husband is tipping into dementia, and she's trying to hide that and keep herself independent. You have an aunt and uncle from each side. So an aunt or uncle. You have Auntie Naomi from the Perlmutter side, who is more of a paragon of modern orthodoxy and has somewhat of a compromised worldview between Zadie Perlmutter and say Grandma Bindi in many respects. You have Uncle Mark Grossberg, who is largely checking out of religion in that he's very secular, he's intermarried, and he's trying to put religion behind him, except for the fact that he's got a very young daughter, and he's beginning to realize that his young daughter is not going to be Jewish, and that's beginning to trouble him. And so you have this whole question of Jewish identity and intermarriage that's raised in the novel as well. And finally, the last character that gets a chapter to herself is Evan's girlfriend, Carrie, who's in from Skokie, Illinois, for the bar mitzvah. And she's the only one who's doesn't have a dog in the fight, basically. She's the only one who's an outsider who has the ability to really see Manny's pain, which is being neglected because everyone else can't get beyond their own pain. And so you have those 9 separate characters, and the action advances through the lenses of a different character. And that's deliberate because what I find is that in the United States right now, in many communities, in my own community as well, but in many communities in the United States, politics is getting in the way of our humanity. That is, if we see someone who disagrees with us politically, many people are othering them, seeing them as the enemy, rather than seeing them as good-natured people, the nice same human beings that you were friends with 5-10 years ago, who just disagree. And maybe they're wrong, but they're still decent people who you can talk to and have a conversation with. And I think I'm sorry, yeah?
I agree with you. Yes.
So that's the idea. Part of the idea of the novel is to get people to see things through other people's eyes. And I think I'm uniquely suited to that because I do that when I teach. I teach many theories that I don't agree with, that I don't subscribe to, but I always wear hats. I tell my students I'm wearing a Marxist hat today, and I'll put on a Marxist hat and teach it as if it's my own view of the world, and as faithfully as possible, and I'll answer questions with a Marxist hat on. I tell them that I'll wear other hats too, and they should challenge me even when I wear my own hat, but nonetheless, I try to teach things in a respectful manner so we can disagree, but disagree constructively rather than in a hostile or aggressive manner.
I cannot agree with you more. And I always just say, I'm a teacher as well, and I always used to say that, if my students knew my views politically, then I haven't done my job. I just try to teach without, putting the views into their head, let them decide for themselves. So I'm just curious, how difficult was that for you? I mean, you have to have a whole big spreadsheet to do all these different points of view and just say who's going to say what at what time?
No, not really. I mean, so when I scope out a novel, I start off with a detailed, probably 5 to 6 page single spaced outline, which includes basic plot lines, includes characters, character traits, worldviews, attitudes, unique features, contradictions. I don't think I understand a character until I understand the contradictions, and then brief understandings of what happens in each chapter. I don't usually have an ending when I start sketching it out.
Okay.
That comes to me afterwards. I think if I write to an ending, it's not going to be genuine because the characters change in my mind. But I don't stick to my outline, so I start with that. And that helps me understand who they're dealing with. But then the key for me to writing, and I know it's different from the way a lot of people write, but what I learned from academic writing is I don't write from page 1 to page last. Instead, I have all of my chapters open at any given time, and with plus marks all around indicating that there's scenes that are missing or that aren't fleshed out properly. And when I see a scene, when I understand it, when I have a dialogue clearly in my head, which will often happen to me when I'm walking to shul on Shabbat, you can't write it down afterwards, but I'll often walk there and have this scene absolutely in my head in this dialogue. I will, I'll work on the sections that I understand and that I feel. And that means that I don't have a spreadsheet. I don't have a clear blueprint. I often just let my mind float and understand the characters.
Well, I always tell people with writing, it's a lot of times you could be dead set on something happening, and sometimes your characters will tell you differently how it's going to happen. So,
absolutely. I heard Edgar Carrot before I started writing, but I knew I was going to. Edgar Carrot met a small group of academics, actually, as part of that, and he was saying that his characters talked to him, and I thought he was being pretentious, and I really owe him an apology, because what I find is that my characters will tell me, you don't get me at all. That line of dialogue is not at all credible, or what you had me do, I would never do, and they're usually right. So I've learned to trust them, and I'll often rewrite sections after having a turbulent night of sleep where a character is just berating me.
I met him as well in Israel, and a very fascinating person. So, okay, so without spoilers or anything, so what are you working on next? Are there any dream projects on the horizon?
So I have finished 3 additional novels beyond Bullet Holes and Oracle of Spring Garden Road. So I have those in the pipeline. The next one that I'm going to bring out is probably the one that's closest to what I do as a day job, in that it deals more with international politics, but it's a spy novel. And I go back
wow.
to my love of John le Carré, and it's more of a Jewish themed spy novel. But it's about it's about a Defense Department official Noah Mandelbaum, who finds himself in Japan, in Tokyo, on the run from both U.S. and Russian intelligence services. And so the story takes place past and present. It's epistolary in nature, but he's writing a letter to his son explaining more or less how he got there and what happened, while at the same time in the present he's trying to stay ahead of someone, he's not sure who's on his tail, some security force that's on his tail. And so that was a lot of fun to write, actually. It was very different. And then the last one that I just finished is a novel. It's more of an experimental novel, in a sense, psychological thriller in a way, of a character who's finding that things just aren't what they seem, and he's trying to deal with that. Also Jewish themed.
You shopping those now?
I'm actually putting the previous one, the Waiting for the Thunder, my spy novel. I've put that on hold right now. I want to concentrate on marketing bullet holes, and in about 6 months, I'm hoping that I'll use bullet holes as a springboard for marketing the next one to agents, pitching that to agents.
Well, those sound well. Good luck with those, and most importantly, now for you, how can people follow you on social media?
So I am I'm on X, I think _Ripsman. I'm on Facebook, Norrin Ripsman, Norrin M. Ripsman Facebook. I also have a Norrin Ripsman Facebook, Norrin Ripsman Fiction Books Facebook page. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on LinkedIn, although I mainly use LinkedIn for my international relations professional. The other ones I use for fiction.
Norrin, I want to thank you again for coming on today. I know we've had to postpone it a couple of times, so thank you for being patient, and appreciate you coming on. Pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure, a wonderful conversation. All the best, Jonathan.
Thank you. Let me sign this off.
Okay.
Again, this has been The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. Again, a very special thanks to Norrin Ripsman. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.